What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here to talk about the hiring of Brian Flores and Kevin Colbert's recent press conference going over how the team's going to proceed in this offseason. But before we get into that, I'll introduce my co-host, Shayne Kubis. Shayne, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing better because we have something to talk about.
Yes.
And it's not only something to talk about, but something good to talk about, which is always better. Uh,
Yeah.
so,
Normally, this kind of news would probably break, about an hour after we finished recording.
yeah, normally.
So then we have to either start over again or wait until next time. But, like we said last time, we're running out of stuff to talk about. So this was perfectly timed.
Yes.
But because the Brian Flores thing, there's a lot we can talk about. We're going to start with the Kevin Colbert thing because it's a little more cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave a pretty extensive press conference today and basically confirmed that he is stepping down from the general manager role. He indicated that he will still be involved with the team. He's not exactly sure to what extent, but essentially his general manager contract is expiring, and he's kind of just walking away from that.
Yeah, and I think that if I had to guess, it's basically going to kind of be like an advisory role where like maybe he doesn't have day-to-day responsibilities at all, but he can be called upon for whether it's just his opinion or whatever it might be. That seems like where it's going to go, and I think that's ultimately good. I mean, he's done a great job for us for the past 20 years, so like having him still be involved in some way, I think is a good thing for sure.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, like we've been saying this whole time, we kind of just expect Brandon Hunt, maybe
Yes.
Omar Khan to get this job, but they are still interviewing candidates. I think they've interviewed 10 candidates. They basically said that, yeah, we can interview anybody right now until like March 1st without having to get permission. So we're just going to turn over every stone we can, which again makes sense for them from an organizational standpoint. A lot of it could just be information gathering about processes and how other teams are operating. Because I still think at the end of the day, it is Hunt's job to lose.
Yeah.
And especially with Colbert staying on in a reduced role, it'd be hard for me to believe that they really just go in a completely different direction.
Right, because not only do you have to like if you do hire someone outside the organization right now, you have to run it through with them of like what is Colbert's responsibility actually going to be? How much is he going to have? That's something that maybe an outside candidate isn't going to be quite as comfortable with as the guys we already have in the building. So it does seem to point in that direction, which again, people are going to be upset about it probably, but this is something that we should be expecting, right? Like it just is what it is.
And I think that if you don't promote Hunt, I think you run the risk of him leaving and going somewhere else, which would be
will.
that would be a problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that.
So some of the other stuff that came up, the big thing was kind of the quarterback discussion, and
yes,
he basically said that like right now Mason is our quarterback, and it was again simply because he's like one of two guys on the roster, and he's the one who's actually played in regular season, and it seems that they're going to go get somebody, possibly plural, but it's kind of like it's Mason's job to lose right now, but they said they're going to add at least two. He said two. We're going to go to camp with four.
That's what he said. Yeah,
you think that they'll probably draft or sign somebody, and then have like a undrafted free agent that they bring in as like their Duck Hodges, basically.
I still think there's a world where maybe Dobbs is the fourth guy in camp. Still.
That's true. I forgot about that
because I feel like that would be a good guy to have in the building, regardless of
no question.
What his role would end up being. But like, so to me, I think it just comes down to whether they end up signing somebody or, making some sort of move for a veteran, or if they go in the draft at some point. That's the most likely option, obviously. So
actually, Dobbs is a free agent this year, so they would have to just sign him.
Right. That's kind of what I was saying. I think I could see him being like that. The guy that's technically fourth in camp or maybe third ahead of if it's like a young rookie or something, and then they work it out from there. But yeah, again, none of that surprises me. That's pretty much what I expected him to say. Everyone knows they're going to add quarterbacks, so it's not like he shouldn't say that. It's more so it doesn't really give us any indication of what direction they're looking at, obviously. So
right, and he talked about some of the other players that kind of had issues this season, namely Kendrick Green and Devin Bush, and basically said, we still like these guys, like they have our support. They went through some rough times, but we expect them to continue to improve next year. And he basically said, like, this season it's good we got the playoffs, but getting bounced the first round is not acceptable.
Yeah, it's not good enough.
Yeah, but I thought it was. I'm not surprised about his comments about those players.
No, I wasn't expecting him to come out and be like, "Yeah, Kendrick is bust. We're gonna have to like that." You don't do
We
that.
missed on
Like,
that one, guys. Fair, full
yeah,
disclosure.
like, it's just that's not gonna happen. And like the only way that even something like that would remotely happen is if they're like prepared to be gone with him after this offseason, which is not gonna happen. But I again, none of this is all pretty standard stuff for the most part from what we got from him. It was nice to get an update, a little bit, somewhat of an update on Tuitt's situation, where at least we know
Just an
they've been in
actual comment
right,
about
like they've been in contact
yeah.
with him at least semi recently, which is good. Um, again, the fact that that's all we really got still concerns me, but it's nice to know that at least he hasn't just kind of ignored the organization and been able to actually be in contact with people. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But that's going to be one of the biggest things that sways, I think, what direction we ultimately go in the offseason is whether we're going to have him available or not, or at least there's a reason to think we will.
Yeah, and again, I'm not exactly sure, that because he still has a pretty big contract, and
Yes,
his, I'll say, employment status,
yeah.
or lack thereof, could kind of swing. Because the other big thing you talked about was how much money they have in this free agency cycle, which is something they haven't had since Cower was the coach.
Probably, yeah, and even then it was much less money to work with the
Yeah,
salary cap. So
yeah,
it's really going to make an impact because if they know that he's not going to be able to be on the team, then that
yeah.
changes what they do with his contract and how they handle that, and that could create more money, but obviously at the expense of a player that I'd really like to have back if he's healthy. So that's going to be a big thing to look out for, like when we get concrete news on his status for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else from his press conference today that you want to touch on before we jump into Brian Flores' stuff?
Really, I mean, like I said, other than the fact they did reiterate that they're planning to tender Haskins, which again, make sure he's on the roster,
Cool.
which whatever. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the conversation is still about this, but putting like a first round tender on him, I think, which that's what I heard. Now, I guess it's just because it's not that much of a difference money wise, and it would just kind of basically guarantee that no one would even consider the thought of even like contacting his agent about the deal, which is true. Like, there's no way anyone would do. I mean, you could put almost any tender. I think nobody's going to take a shot at him, but still, like,
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, the RFA tender thing is very odd.
It's weird. Yeah, it's a weird system, but like, is what it is. But that's really, I mean, pretty much everything else we kind of covered. Like, they're interviewing GM still, and it's him and Rooney in second. Obviously, he's helping with that. But again, I think that's mostly, like you said, kind of an information gathering / just kind of lay of the land, see who's available, who's not, type of thing. But yeah, pretty much all I took away from that.
So, speaking of interviewing and hiring and everything,
yes,
we'll get to the big news now. And the comment that Colbert made, I thought was very funny in kind of his very dry, gruff manner. And when they said, did Brian Flores' lawsuit, play into how this hiring went down? He said, no, like, we hired a good football coach who can help us win games. It's like, yep, that's Kevin Colbert. Like, there's absolutely no nonsense whatsoever, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people with the media talking about like trying to downplay the Steelers signing him and from the sense of like his lawsuit and everything else. And I'm like, so first of all, they don't need any other reason to hire Brian Flores other than he's Brian Flores, right? So I am 100% on board. That's 110% the number one reason he was signed. But we know this organization well enough to know that they were the ones who, if anyone was going to hire him, they were going to be the ones to do it, and we all know why that is.
Yeah, I mean, this like I want to find a way. I probably need to ask somebody because I can't do this myself to, get like the little cap that people always Photoshop on like Shannon Sharp.
Yes.
And put it on like Kevin Colbert and Dan Rooney for all the hirings. And I mean, every person they interviewed for the defensive coordinator this offseason was an African American or minority. Most people they've interviewed for the GM spot are African Americans or minorities. Flores himself is Latino, but obviously he is also Black, so that's a big part of it. But I mean, yeah, what other team would do this? As I wrote on our outline, Kings stay Kings.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that, there is an interesting discussion to be had about how does this move like affect either party's leverage in this case. I'm not sure that it really does because it is such a relatively minor role
compared to what
he was interviewing for.
Exactly.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is like being done to kind of rehabilitate the NFL's image specifically with regards to this. I think the Steelers are just doing this because they're like, this guy's a good coach.
This guy's a great coach, and also I know for a fact the Steelers have no trouble kind of just giving the middle finger to everyone else in situations like
Yeah.
this, which I appreciate. But also, like, the biggest thing I think is that they're not going to worry about anything to do with the lawsuit because they know that they're going to be on board with him no matter
Yeah.
what. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
they don't
yeah.
care. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to like basically the Steelers kind of just get a free pass. They're excused from this lawsuit because I mean,
Right, they're like,
there's really nothing
they already
you can
pretty
say.
much, yeah, they would have already been like, yeah, listen, we've kind of talked to you guys about this before.
Yeah, hey, we've been trying.
We've been doing the best, literally the best that we're could possibly be doing, and yet here we are, like, so.
Yeah,
how's this our fault anyway? So.
Yeah, this is like when like we have a group of friends and they're just absolute liabilities when going out, and you're just kind of like, I'm trying to keep this group together.
My best. I have Uber ready to go. It's just like, but still, one of them still in the lake somehow. What happened?
The Steelers are the designated driver of the NFL.
Yeah, what it feels like a lot of the time. Like, and again, I appreciate that, but also like, let's get some help. Can someone give us some help?
Yeah,
like, can somebody check on what the Texans are doing? Like, what's going on with them? Are they okay?
What the Cowboys are doing?
Yeah, are they okay? Like, what's going on at the end of the NFC in general?
Cowboys are still in the bathroom doing God knows what.
Right. Like, I just, God, it's what it feels like every week. It's like, what is going on in the NFL?
But anyways, let's get into like the actual football aspect of this. Yes. So I think the most interesting part is that he is taking over the senior defensive assistant role, which was previously held by Terrell Austin, who is now being promoted to defensive coordinator. And Flores will also coach linebackers. They're still unsure about the Jerry Olszewski situation with his wife, who recently passed away, and he took a leave of absence. So that's something, I'm not sure if Flores is going to be the only guy or if he's going to work tag team with Olszewski. Regardless, what did you make of that being him kind of earning that same designation as Austin?
I think it's interesting because clearly, like, a lot of people were talking immediately after, like, why wasn't he the defensive coordinator hire, right? Because he has, more of a track record, obviously, than Austin. Not that Austin doesn't have one, because clearly it does. With
I think you could make a very sound argument that Austin has a better resume as a defensive coordinator,
right? As a defensive coordinator specifically, yeah. But like, that's the whole thing. I think that was the thing that surprised me the most about it was the fact that he took this low of a role. But I think we all know why those.
Oh yeah.
So like, it is interesting because, and we'll talk about it a little bit as far as line of succession and things like that. But it sets up the Steelers to have multiple guys who have not only have coordinator experience, but have head coaching experience now with Flores in the room as well. And just that dynamic of Tomlin, Austin, and Flores in the defensive rooms together it's ridiculous potential. It's just disgusting.
It's really this is also like the dragon meme where it's the three heads of the dragon and then the other weird head of the dragon, and there's basically four because you have Tomlin, you have Flores, you have Austin, then the other head is Matt Canada.
Yes, and then Matt Canada's just sitting over there like
with his tongue out, just has no clue what's happening.
Yeah, just like what's going on?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
So yeah. But so the thing that, and a lot of people, I saw some people like saying like, oh, like he's going to take over for Tomlin in a few years, and I'm not sure. So my thought process is that, I think after maybe 2 or 3 years, if this defense stays together and Austin coordinates it well, he could get interviews for head coaching jobs.
Yes.
Because he was getting interviewed when he was like the Lions defensive coordinator, was a kind of a hot name in the streets.
Yes, he was.
Before the Lions fell apart again.
Yeah.
So, if in 3 years he gets hired, they would ostensibly probably promote Flores to defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 5 or 10 years, or maybe not 10, 10 years total, 5 more years of him being the DC, maybe that's when Tomlin wants to hang it up, because I don't think he's even 50 yet.
No, I believe he's 48 or something like that.
I'm looking it up right now. He is 49, so he'll actually turn 50 in like a month. But still, he's still super young. He's, not slowing down by any means. But, Cowher retired a lot younger than people kind of remember.
Yeah.
So, Tomlin could kind of do the same thing, especially if they kind of get back to winning. And he kind of sets the organization on a good path with whoever the new quarterback is. And, where you basically have the quarterback and TJ Watt is kind of the lead, and Minkah Fitzpatrick as the leaders of the franchise, and Najee Harris as the leaders of the franchise, moving into like the next era of Steelers football.
Right. I think that is the most likely scenario. If that is any, I don't think they're thinking about it in that way that much right now. But if we want to look at it from Flores' standpoint of like, okay, he goes to an organization that is sometimes even to a fault, extremely loyal to their guys,
Yes.
and definitely are not quick to move on from people
Yeah.
at Matt Canada, no matter what the situation really is. So it does make sense for him if he wants to still, pursue his legal situation while also having an opportunity to stay in the NFL in a position where he knows he can grow into other roles possibly. But I think with Tomlin, it would make a lot of sense if he does want to retire earlier than, again, maybe people think, even at his age. He'll still have been a coach for 20 plus years by the time this would be happening, if this is how it goes. That's a long time to be a head coach of a franchise. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, Cowher retired a lot earlier than people remember. It happens sometimes. I mean, a lot of these guys, they try to coach as long as they can, but not everybody is, Belichick, Carroll, those guys who, even Arians, even with all his problems he had to deal with too. Like, not everybody wants to or is able to do it for that long. And I think Tomlin, especially if, like you said, he does set us up very good for the next 5-10 years after he'd be gone. And even if we maybe can get another championship at some point with him, he won't have anything to prove at that. He can just say, okay, well, I'm out. And then he can go retire and do whatever he wants to do. But yeah, that's when Flores, if he's still around, that would be a chance for him to come into that role and take it from there.
Yeah, I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up the burgeoning connection that Mike Tomlin is building with Boston College, which is my alma mater, given
Yeah.
that Brian Flores played there. And Mike Tomlin's son actually just transferred to
I
play
saw
football at
that. Yeah,
Boston College.
I remember talking about that. Yeah.
So I'm very excited by whatever that means. Just
Phil
excited.
Jerkovich.
Oh, buddy, it's happening.
Listen, that would be fantastic.
Listen, Zion Johnson this year,
Yep.
Phil Jerkovich next
There you
year,
go.
get Zay Flowers in the second round. It's all coming together.
There you go. Rebuilt
But
team.
with regards to his the players he's coaching, so I think obviously the big key is Devin Bush and getting him back on the developmental arc that he was on prior to his ACL tear. And I think that's going to happen. I think that would happen kind of regardless of Flores.
Yeah, I thought he was in line for that.
Yeah, I think him being fully removed from the ACL tear for another year, getting a more healthy defensive line in front of him. And then again, kind of a different take on this scheme with guys like Austin and Flores, kind of having some new ideas that might be able to use them better. And then I think the other one is interesting is, does Buddy Johnson take a step into being a role player or even more than that?
Yeah, because this would be the best opportunity for him to be able to develop and have some sort of role in his second season. And even if it isn't him, I do think that we could see, and we've talked about a little bit because I've been messing around with some mock drafts and stuff like that. Like
it is the season.
getting a physically talented, guy, maybe not fully developed, but a guy that you can get third, fourth round, some of those guys that might be available, get them in the building and let Flores develop them into the type of player that they need to be to help out with Bush or whoever it ends up being. They're in a position to get that back to a position of strength where it hasn't been for a while.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see, and I don't think this will happen this year, and it might not even happen for a few more years, but do we see the Belichickian archetypes kind of start to appear more with the Steelers? Because especially with the linebackers, Belichick has been very, and Flores to some extent, given the guys that he brought in when he was in Miami with Kyle Van Noy, they're still very married to that idea of the very big linebacker, the Donta Hightower, the Kyle Van Noy, even the Jamie Collins, and those bigger linebackers that aren't the fleetest of foot, but they're very versatile. And so I'm wondering, and you mentioned Troy Anderson, the Montana State linebacker, what about guys like Darian Beavers or Leo
that's another one. Yep.
Who again are the Steelers last few years have been investing in these smaller linebackers that
with more
the 6'1", 230-ish,
right.
The more modern build,
more
if you
range,
will. And do we see them go more towards that throwback type, especially because we kind of are wanting to see Devin Bush more as the run and chase linebacker as opposed to one that's coming downhill and taking on blocks.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense if they are going to add to the position, and maybe Johnson can develop into something like that for them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's
a little bigger.
He's a little bigger than Bush.
I think he's 6'2" or 6'3" and 235 pounds,
something like that.
So he's a good bit bigger, I think.
Yeah, so maybe that's him. Like I said, maybe it's someone else. But bring in that type of archetype, I think would be good for this team because again, they focused on these smaller backers, and they're important in the NFL. If you have guys who can do that, obviously, it's the reason why we're going in that way.
Yeah,
but having somebody who has a little bit more versatility to them and more size to handle, like I said, those duties, I think would be really important to bring in if they don't see that with Johnson.
As long as they don't get these guys on the slot receivers, I'll be fine.
Yeah, that's honestly that's the one thing I'm like, man, are we maybe? And I don't want to say it because like I feel like it'll jinx it. But like, are we gonna stop seeing like Keenan Allen guys get freaking covered by
Robert
whoever?
Spillane.
Exactly. Like, are we gonna stop seeing that?
I feel like no, because I feel like that's kind of just like now it's the brand and like it just has to
Yeah.
keep
Now
going.
you have to do it. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like okay, like put TJ Watt on CD
It's
Lamb. Let's do it.
you have to keep this defense from becoming too powerful.
Right. It's like
This is
a
the
limiter.
handicap, or this is nerfing the
Yeah.
Steelers
They're
defense. So it's
literally
like
like
it has to be kind of fair.
yeah,
So
they
you have to
we
like take 5 snaps a game where you have a linebacker on a slot receiver.
right. And like it doesn't matter how good that receiver
Yep.
is either. It's like they could be anyone. It's like, yeah, we'll put them on.
Yeah. All right.
Jeez.
Now I want to get into the discussion of internal versus external hires because
Oh
we had the whole
boy. There we go.
discussion about line of succession. And I say that because I'm saying this because I can't wait in 5 years when Brian Flores probably becomes a defensive coordinator. Everybody will be like, oh, like they never hire from outside the organization. To which I say, neither of these last two people have been promoted from within, yes, but they have been very much external hires because Carol Austin has a long coaching history at a lot of places with a lot of different schools of thought. Flores is very married to the Belichick, style of defense, but that is a very much, not anathema to how the Steelers run their defense, but it's a very different philosophy. So if people are complaining about this becoming an internal hire eventually, I just can't deal with that. And also, like this is an excellent external hire. So if you
Oh
are,
yeah.
this is an external hire and it's a great one. So shut up.
I love it because there's certain things that no matter what fan base you're looking at, no matter how good, bad, or otherwise they are, there's always something that can be complained about by
Mm-hmm.
fans, right? And this seems to be a big one for this fan base because they get so upset about things that one are semantics a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the time, and two, that just doesn't you hire the guys that you think are good for the role.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how you get to that point. It doesn't matter if you hired them 10 years ago and they've been building themselves up in the organization. I don't care if you hired them 2 years ago and they just kind of moved up the ranks. Every hire at some point, outside of having a relationship with them when they were even not even a coach, like bringing them in like after they were a player or whatever, is an external hire at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is if you were hiring someone externally at a lower position, ideally you want them to move up the ranks because now you're comfortable with them, you already know them well, and if you think they can do that job, then great. If you don't think you can do that, then that's when you go find someone who's either established or whatever. Maybe they do what you're trying to do on defense. You don't have somebody who can do that, whatever. But again, 5 years from now, if Flores does move up in some way, whether it's defensive coordinator, God forbid, head coach, they're gonna be like, yeah, why aren't you hiring someone like they hired him did you not remember that they hired him
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago? Like this is not this is a promotion, not an
Yeah.
internal hire. There's a difference. You bring in a guy with the hope that he continues up the ladder. If he doesn't, oh well, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But
And the thing to remember about that is like, if you think about it, even over just the last 5 years or so, there's been it's been incremental, but it's been consistent about a remaking of this team's coaching staff. Like you think
Yeah.
about when like Joey Porter was one of the primary position coaches on this team. I can't remember some of the other ones, like Carnell Lake. Like I don't think is he still with the team or
No, I don't think he's there anymore.
okay. So like guys like that,
Yeah.
that were kind of in that 2010s era of the Steelers coaching staff.
Mhm.
A lot of those guys have been phased out, and finally,
Yeah.
and Keith Butler's kind of the nail in that coffin. Like when you think about
Yes.
bringing guys like Carl Dunbar, and then Jerry Olszewski to some extent, and then obviously all these new guys that have been coming in just these last 2 years, Terrell Austin's and Brian Flores. It's like I hear the complaints about a team like the Steelers that is so rooted in tradition being a little too insular and kind of just we're doing things our way, our way to the highway, because at some point you do need to kind of self-scout and reevaluate how you're doing things at some point.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think that since those mid 2010s teams, there has been a bit of that by bringing in a lot of new and different voices. And so I think all these complaints are just because people want things to complain about. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's a problem with Steelers fans because fans want to complain about something, and Steelers fans have had 20 years without a losing season. So
it's hard to find something.
yeah,
but they do anyway.
And I think people are just bored and they want to find flaws to yell about.
Well,
So
hey, listen, good news for all those people. Buckle up. You're going to have new stuff probably
Yeah.
in the next couple of years because
yeah,
we're probably, and I don't want to sound too pessimistic about it, but we're likely going to see the first time in a while of this team really not being up there. This year obviously there was not much expectations. We still managed to get the playoffs, but like there's gonna be some fans who are gonna be pretty shell shocked by seeing what's gonna be happening in the next couple of
even
years.
just from a standpoint, not even talking about the Steelers, just the depth of the AFC
Yeah,
in the North and the conference as a whole. Like there are just a lot of really good teams with really good quarterbacks, and the Steelers do not have.
we are
the
definitely behind the 8 ball right now.
Yeah,
for sure.
which
So
and
it's
that's before you even discuss the team itself. So
right.
that's a whole thing. The other angle that a lot of people are kind of talking about is the idea of Brian Flores' relationship with Minkah Fitzpatrick, which was ostensibly the reason that Minkah was traded in the first place, because Minkah and Flores did not get along with specific regard to how Minkah was being used in that defense, the type of drills that they were doing. I remember seeing a lot of stuff about Minkah not wanting to do a lot of tackling in practice. And there's been a lot of kind of like, it's been funny with Minkah because he went to the Steelers and he's like, I want to, play one thing and do that. And they basically did that for the first year. And then he's like, oh, I kind of want to move around a bit. And they did a little bit of that. And then this year he moved around a little bit more, but just mostly to cover up people. So he wasn't necessarily playing different positions, just like playing different alignments and coverages just to help others out. But I don't think I think these guys are professionals. It's been a few years for Minkah. He's kind of moved past it. Flores has obviously kind of had a bit of a rough road these last few months. So maybe he'll they're both professionals. They're both adult men. I think they'll be able to get past it. And also, I don't think Flores will be that involved with coaching Minkah hands-on. So
honestly, I think that the thing that you've seen is I think Minkah's just grown up more.
Yeah.
Like, I think he understands the NFL is the way that it is, and you can't always just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
No matter how good of a player you are. Like, he probably would have liked to not do a lot of the stuff he had to do this year. He would have rather been a playmaking safety. He would have rather had the opportunity to do more of that. But you do what you need to do to make things work, right? And he led the team in tackles. And he didn't want to do tackling drills a couple years ago. I'm sure he's probably moved past that part of his career, right? Like, he clearly understands that his talent needs to be used in the way that helps the team the most, even if it doesn't always make him look the best or put him in the best position. And obviously, I'm hoping to see more of what he did for us his first year, being that big time playmaker, because it'll be so valuable. But if that's not what he needs to do because of where we're at on defense, then that's not what he's going to do, and he understands that now.
Yeah, and I'm not obviously I'm not an NFL coach, so I don't know, but I think the bigger part of this issue was like every week it was like he'd be playing like outside cornerback one week and then playing like nickel linebacker the next week. And those are very different positions. So and I think he's just like, man, like this is like my second year in the league. Like I need some help,
No, yeah, and that was a fair point. I think that he was right about that at the time, but I think that obviously the extent that he's going to be used in different positions has definitely been way less with us than it was with the Dolphins. But
yeah, exactly.
Flores also didn't have the talent to work with at the time that we do.
Yeah.
Like he was just, I think he legitimately was just like, I have this guy who can do all this stuff. I need him to do everything. And not thinking about the fact like this is still a young player that probably doesn't want to have to think so much when he's playing.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so it's fair.
Yeah. And this kind of, it reminds, also I think I heard this summer, but it reminds me of kind of like those kind of later Todd Haley, Ben Roethlisberger years where they, I don't think it's gonna be that bad because they were like, oh, guys could hate each other, and it's like I don't really know how true that was.
I like to think that it was like it wasn't as bad as we think it was, but it was more of like a comical thing of like, wow, these two just don't work.
I think generally, I think most people would agree that Ben is just kind of ornery.
Oh, he definitely is.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't, and obviously Todd Haley's an interesting person, so he has some of his own issues, but. The final thing I think I want to get into this is a lot of like the connecting of dots with Brian Flores and players he's coached that are going to be impending free agents. And the two big ones are Stephon Gilmore and JC Jackson. They're both cornerbacks, and a lot of people have been linking those players to the Steelers even before Brian Flores was hired. So I probably prefer Jackson at this point just because he's much younger. But I mean, Gilmore's obviously excellent. The Steelers have had great success with signing older cornerbacks kind of in the back end of their career. Yeah. So, and I can't really think of any other big ones off the top of my head besides those, but we have to steal, like we said, the Steelers have a lot of money to burn this year. So hopefully they go out and spend it on guys like this.
Yeah. I mean, the Gilmore angle would be interesting for sure, just because we are going to need somebody to be a stopgap pretty much no matter what we do in the draft or otherwise. So that would be an interesting way to fill that hole. I do think several of my friends, one in particular who he'll when he hears this, he'll know that I'm talking about him. He's been talking up like, do we need to go get J.C. Jackson? I'm like, yeah, he's a great player, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to outbid teams because I don't think they're going to be willing to go as high as some teams might go for him. Even the Patriots, I don't know what they're going to do with him. If they're going to try to bring him back, like really make that a priority. I'm sure they are, but I'm not expecting it, obviously, but I would definitely be down for it if they can get it done. That'd be a huge addition and takes that position kind of off the board, at least for now, early on in the draft, especially too.
Yeah, so the spot rack market value for Jackson, his projected next contract is 5 years, $100 million, which would make him the highest paid corner in the NFL.
Right. That's kind of
about 20, almost just under $21 million a year. So JC Jackson has been very good. There are probably 3 cornerbacks I'd be willing to pay that much money.
That's the problem.
And his name is not among that list.
That's what I'm saying. It's like because he's going to be the top guy in free agency at that position. That's going to drive up his price like it always does with those guys. You know, you're the next guy up in terms of in line for big money. It's going to be hard to justify paying him that much for any team to do that, but the Steelers are not going to be one of those teams that go after him if he does command that much money. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and the problem is like Stephon Gilmore will probably be 32 like when the season starts,
roughly. I think,
and
so, yeah.
that's when you look at his comparable players in terms of age and in terms of these contracts, like it's Joe Hayden. So you're kind of just setting the clock back a year or two in terms of this Joe Hayden process. Right. But again, like Gilmore was, the best corner in football not too long ago. So,
exactly. Yeah. So I think he's not,
he like Hayden, he was never a guy that just won with speed. Like he was a very technically sound,
100%.
corner that wasn't just like relying on athleticism. So I would be fine with that. Even if it's just a stopgap for, like you said, for like 2 years or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, we figure that out.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on Brian Flores that you want to hit on?
Really? No, like I said, I think that, again, the conversation surrounding this is going to be really focused on, obviously, the legal stuff with him.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I do think that it's not one of the reasons necessarily the Steelers hired him, but it's the reason why they felt comfortable hiring him because they don't care about that with him. They have no trouble.
Right.
They have no trouble like taking that on as part of that process because they're going to be, on his side ostensibly as much as they can be.
Yeah. So, there are not many teams that have an established internal culture that would be able to pull this move off.
Exactly.
And probably some of them are ones that are directly tied to this lawsuit in terms of who is interviewing him and hiring him. So that limits the options as well. But, and a lot of the ones that, he were involved are the ones with some of the worst cultures in terms of what they're doing right now. So I don't think almost any other team could have pulled this off. No. And I think this is going to be a major coup for the Steelers going down the road, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. Guess we'll probably start diving more into actual draft stuff as the combine will be approaching, if it ends up happening. Or
that whole situation is interesting.
That's wild. But in the meantime, Shayne, let people know where they can find your work.
Find me at Shayne Kubis, as it's spelled on the screen here if you're watching. And at Steelers ATB, or hopefully, again, once we have some more stuff coming out. I did make one tweet about the Flores news, but that's all I've really done. I didn't really want to dive into it too much because there's a lot of not so fun discourse on Twitter about it, but we'll get into it. But other than that, right now is where you can follow me.
And you can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Make sure you're following Around the Block on Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, on all those channels to keep up with us and the stuff we're doing. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.